There is a mystery that every believer must understand if they are to walk victoriously in this kingdom, the perfection of divine timing. Many times, and gentlemen, we are anxious, restless, and troubled because of what we have not yet seen. Forgetting that with God, delay is never denial. Gentlemen, what we call late in heaven's agenda is still on time. Oh, God operates on a timetable that is far superior to human calendars. He does not measure life the way men do. Men use hours, days, and years, but God functions with seasons. And gentlemen, that is why you can look at your life today and it may look like nothing is happening, but in heaven's program, you are exactly where you should be. The Bible says He makes all things beautiful in His time. That means outside of His timing, even the right thing will look wrong. Outside of His timing, what was meant to bless you can become a burden. A good gift that arrives at the wrong time can destroy a destiny. That is why maturity in God requires that you learn the patience of waiting. Waiting is not wasting. Waiting is proof that you trust the integrity of God. And gentlemen, every time you are required to wait, it is not because God has forgotten you. No, He is preparing both you and the promise. And gentlemen, sometimes He holds back certain doors because you are not yet ready for the weight of what is behind them. If He gave it to you too early, it would crush you instead of lifting you. Think about Joseph. The visions came when he was 17, but the fulfillment did not arrive until 13 years later. Was God unfair? No, the palace was already there, but Joseph was not yet prepared for the palace. His journey through the pit, Potiphar's house, and the prison was not punishment. It was preparation. By the time Pharaoh called him, Joseph was no longer just a dreamer. Gentlemen, he had become a man of wisdom, character, and resilience. That is what waiting produces. So, when you see others overtaking you, don't be discouraged. They are running their race, you are running yours. The race of destiny is not a competition, it is a divine alignment. If God says your season is tomorrow, no amount of prayer or fasting today can make it happen. And if God says today is your day, nothing in hell can stop it. Man has always been a creature bound by time. We wake up in the morning, measure our days by hours, and end them at night. We mark our progress by months and years, and we are often quick to judge success or failure based on the ticking of the clock. Yet, gentlemen, when it comes to the dealings of God, His operations are not confined to human measurements of time. God is not limited by the 24-hour cycle, nor is He pressured by the passage of years. He works according to seasons, gentlemen, and this understanding is crucial for anyone who seeks to walk with Him without frustration or premature discouragement. And gentlemen, what looks like delay in human calculations is simply God waiting for His appointed season. There is a significant difference between time and season. Time is quantitative. It is the continuous measure of minutes, hours, and years. Season, however, is qualitative. It speaks of the right moment, and the divinely appointed atmosphere and the convergence of circumstances where God's purpose comes into full expression. A person may be 25, gentlemen, 30 or 50 years old, but until their season arrives, certain doors will remain closed. On the other hand, when their season comes, what years could not produce can manifest in a single moment. This is why people can labor for years without visible results, and suddenly in one season there is acceleration and recognition that cannot be explained by human effort alone. The scriptures often illustrate this principle. Consider the life of Abraham. God gave him a promise that he would become the father of many nations. Yet, gentlemen, it took 25 years before Isaac was born. If Abraham had measured his destiny by the clock, he would have concluded that God was late. And gentlemen, but God was never late. The child of promise could not have come 1 year earlier or 1 year later. It had to be at the appointed season. Another example is found in Joseph. He received dreams as a teenager, visions of leadership and prominence. But those dreams did not manifest immediately. Instead, Joseph went through betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. If one were to look at the ticking clock of Joseph's life, everything would appear to be going backward. But in reality, God was aligning him with his season. When that season came, in one day, gentlemen, he moved from the prison to the palace, proving that God's purposes are not bound to human timelines, but to divine seasons. Gentlemen, this truth will give peace to anyone who feels behind in life. You may look at others and see them succeeding, building careers, families, gentlemen, or ministries, while you remain in the background, it may seem as though time is running out and opportunities are slipping away. And gentlemen, but if you understand that God works with seasons, you will know that as long as you remain in alignment with Him, your season cannot be missed. Ladies and gentlemen, destiny is not a race against another person's clock. The one who appears to be ahead is simply walking in their season, and when yours comes, no force on earth can stop it. What God has written concerning you will not be aborted by the speed of another. Gentlemen, nor will it be frustrated by the seeming slowness of your journey. Seasons are also tied to preparation. God does not waste time. While you wait for your season, He is shaping you, building resilience, teaching obedience, gentlemen, and pruning away immaturity that could destroy you if promotion comes too early. This is why it is dangerous to force open doors outside of divine timing. A gift received prematurely can become a curse. For example, and gentlemen, if Joseph had somehow found his way to Pharaoh's palace without the training of Potiphar's house and the endurance learned in prison, he would not have had the capacity to sustain leadership when the weight of responsibility rested on his shoulders. His waiting was not a punishment but a process of equipping. Another lesson is that seasons require discernment. While men are busy counting hours, gentlemen, wise people are discerning seasons. They understand that a single God ordained season can change a lifetime. And gentlemen, that is why the sons of Issachar in scripture were celebrated. They were men who understood the times and knew what Israel ought to do. They had spiritual intelligence to discern when to wait, when to prepare, and when to move. And gentlemen, a lack of discernment can make someone restless in the waiting phase or complacent when their season of manifestation arrives. Both extremes are dangerous. Seasons also remind us that God is sovereign. If everything happens simply because of our effort and timing, and gentlemen, we would have no need to depend on Him. But God in His wisdom ensures that destiny unfolds in a way that keeps us humble and reliant on Him. This is why sometimes, even when you have done everything right, the results may not show until the season is ripe. Paul plants, Apollos waters, gentlemen, but it is God who gives the increase, and He does so in His season. This divine order keeps us from pride and teaches us trust. Gentlemen, one of the most liberating revelations a believer can embrace is that God is not slow. He is thorough. What appears as delay is often God's way of ensuring that when He lifts you, the foundation is strong enough to keep you there. Many people rise quickly and fall just as fast because they force timing rather than submit it to seasons. But when you yield to God's calendar, gentle, what He builds will last. Therefore, the call is to relax and rest in His faithfulness. Life will always tempt you to panic, gentlemen, especially when you feel that time is slipping away. But remember, God is not governed by the same clock you are. He is the Ancient of Days, yet He makes all things new. He is never late and He never forgets. Your life is scripted in His book, and when the season comes, nothing in heaven and gentlemen, on earth or under the earth can resist the unfolding of His plan. Waiting is one of the most difficult experiences for human beings because by nature, people desire immediacy. When a promise is given, the natural expectation is that it should manifest quickly. Yet in the economy of God, waiting is not a punishment but a process. Waiting is not wasting, it is divine preparation, a spiritual classroom where lessons are taught that cannot be learned anywhere else. In the seasons of delay, God is shaping character, enlarging patience, and building the strength to handle the promise when it finally comes. And gentlemen, many interpret waiting as though God has forgotten them or as though heaven is silent to their cries. They see others moving forward, achieving their goals and receiving answers while their own prayers seem unanswered. This can easily lead to frustration, bitterness, or doubt. But divine waiting is intentional. It is never random. Behind every delay is a God who is carefully working, gentlemen, ensuring that what He brings into your life will not destroy you when it comes. Waiting seasons are proof of God's love, not His absence. Gentlemen, character is one of the primary things God works on during waiting. Blessings without character often end in destruction. A person may be anointed, talented, or intelligent, but if their character has not been tested and refined, they will eventually misuse the gift. Waiting seasons allow life to humble pride, purify motives, and align desires with God's will. The arrogance of immaturity cannot survive in the furnace of waiting. By the time the promise arrives, the one who receives it is no longer the same person who first prayed for it. They are wiser, gentler, more compassionate gentlemen, and more aware of their dependence on God. Patience is another virtue that is cultivated in waiting. Gentlemen, true patience is not simply the ability to endure, but the ability to maintain faith, joy, and consistency while enduring. Gentlemen, anyone can wait angrily or grudgingly, but divine waiting teaches you how to wait with hope and trust. Man, the Apostle James spoke about the farmer who waits for the early and latter rain, knowing that harvest does not happen overnight. The seed is in the ground unseen, but the farmer is confident that growth is taking place beneath the soil. In the same way, gentle waiting trains believers to trust that even when there are no visible results, God is working behind the scenes. Capacity is also built in waiting. Every promise of God carries a weight, and without sufficient strength, that weight can crush instead of bless. For example, a person praying for financial abundance may not yet have the capacity to manage wealth responsibly. If God releases it prematurely, it could fuel recklessness, pride, or destruction. Waiting seasons become training grounds where capacity is enlarged, skills are developed, wisdom is imparted, and resilience is built. When the promise finally arrives, the individual not only enjoys it, but sustains it and uses it effectively. Biblical stories highlight this principle repeatedly. Joseph waited years between the dreams of leadership and the fulfillment in Pharaoh's palace. Gentlemen, in that waiting period, he learned administration in Potiphar's house and endurance in the prison. By the time Pharaoh elevated him, and gentlemen, Joseph was not just a dreamer, but a man equipped to govern a nation. David was anointed as king while still a shepherd boy, but he spent years fleeing from Saul and facing battles in the wilderness. Those years of waiting trained his hands for war, forged loyalty in his followers, and taught him reliance on God. By the time he sat on the throne, David was prepared not only to reign, but to lead with wisdom and compassion. In waiting, perspective is transformed. You begin to realize that delay is not denial. God's silence does not mean rejection. Instead, it means that something greater is being worked out. Many people in hindsight, and gentlemen, have looked back and thanked God for unanswered prayers, because what they once thought was delay was actually divine protection. The relationship that did not work out, the opportunity that was withheld, the promotion that was delayed, all of these were part of God's design to align them with something better. Waiting also separates those who seek God for what he gives from those who seek him for who he is. In the furnace of delay, motives are tested. Do you love God because of the promise, or do you love him regardless of it? Gentlemen, true intimacy with God is forged not in the seasons of instant answers, but in the seasons when nothing seems to be happening, yet your heart remains loyal. Gentlemen, this kind of devotion is priceless, and it is often born only through waiting. It is also important to understand that waiting does not mean idleness. Waiting in God's kingdom is active. It is a time to serve, to grow, to prepare, and to invest in obedience. Gentlemen, those who wait passively often waste their seasons, but those who wait actively come out refined and equipped. The parable of the 10 virgins reveals this truth. All of them were waiting, but only 5 had oil in their lamps, showing that they used their waiting season wisely. The others, though present, were unprepared and missed their moment. Therefore, seasons of waiting should be embraced rather than resisted. They may be painful, but they are purposeful. They strip away impatience, cultivate depth, and strengthen faith. By the time the long-awaited promise comes, it does not catch you unprepared. Instead, you are ready to carry it with honor and sustain it with maturity. The wisdom, humility, gentlemen, and capacity that emerge from waiting become part of your permanent character, enabling you not only to receive blessings, but to manage them in a way that glorifies God. This is why waiting is not wasting. And gentlemen, it is the hand of a loving father shaping his children, so that the promises do not destroy them, but lift them into greater responsibility and influence. And one of the greatest principles of life and destiny is understanding that timing is as important as the gift itself. Every good thing is not profitable at every time. Even blessings must come within the boundaries of divine timing, or they risk turning into burdens. The right gift at the wrong time can destroy Because what was intended to build can become the very thing that breaks a person if their life is not yet prepared to carry it. God, in his wisdom, does not only consider what to give, but also when to give it. This is why some prayers seem unanswered. Gentlemen, not because God has refused, but because heaven understands that premature manifestation could harm rather than help. For example, and gentlemen, fire is good when it is in the fireplace where it belongs. But that same fire outside of its appointed boundary can burn down an entire house. Gentlemen, the blessing of fire does not change, but the timing and context of its use determine whether it becomes helpful or destructive. In the same way, every gift has an appointed time, and receiving it outside of that time can be dangerous. The Bible provides numerous illustrations of this principle. Gentlemen, consider the prodigal son. He demanded his inheritance at the wrong time. There was nothing wrong with the inheritance. It was legitimately his. But because he received it before he was ready, it became the tool of his downfall. He squandered what should have empowered him. And gentlemen, and it was only after pain and loss that he realized he lacked the maturity to handle what he had requested. If the inheritance had come at the right time, when wisdom and discipline had been forged in him, the outcome would have been entirely different. The problem was not the gift, but the premature timing. In contrast, look at David. He was anointed as king while still a young shepherd boy. But the oil came upon his head, but he did not ascend the throne immediately. For years he waited, fought battles, and endured persecution from Saul. That many times it seemed unfair that a man chosen by God should be running for his life. But God knew that if David ascended too early, gentlemen, without the maturity forged to challenges, he would not be able to sustain the weight of kingship. The throne was his by promise, but the season had to be right before the promise could manifest. By the time David finally became king, he was no longer the knave shepherd boy. He had become a leader shaped by waiting, hardship, and reliance on God. This principle applies to every area of life. Marriage, for instance, is a blessing. Yet if entered prematurely, without the emotional and spiritual maturity to handle it, gentlemen, what should be a joy can turn into a lifetime of pain. Financial abundance is another example. Wealth is a tool for good, but in the hands of someone who has not yet learned discipline, generosity, and stewardship, money can fuel destruction. And promotion in career or ministry can also become dangerous when one rises without character. The elevation exposes weaknesses that were never dealt with, leading to collapse. The gift is never the issue. It is the timing and the readiness of the recipient. This is why God often delays certain answers to prayer. Delay is not denial but mercy. What we interpret as divine silence is sometimes divine protection. And God knows that giving certain things prematurely would destroy the very destiny he intends to build. Imagine handing a sharp sword to a toddler and the child would hurt themselves or others. The sword is not evil, but the timing is wrong. The wise parent waits until the child has grown, trained, and matured before entrusting such a weapon to them. In the same way, God withholds certain gifts until we have grown into the capacity to handle them. This truth also calls for humility. Often, people look at others who are already walking in certain blessings and feel envious, but wondering why their own life seems stagnant. But what they do not see is that God measures readiness differently. He knows the hidden weaknesses in the heart, the impatience, the pride, or the lack of resilience. Out of love, he delays manifestation until those flaws are addressed. To push for early manifestation through shortcuts, manipulation, or compromise is to invite disaster. What should have been a testimony can quickly become a tragedy if received outside of divine timing. Preparation, and therefore, is the responsibility of the believer in seasons of waiting. Instead of complaining about delays, it is wiser to ask, what is God building in me that I may not yet see? What lessons is he teaching me so that when the blessing comes, I can sustain it? The years of preparation are not wasted. They are seasons where character is formed, patience is refined, and capacity is enlarged. Gentlemen, that way, when the door opens, the individual is not overwhelmed by the blessing, but strengthened to manage it well. Life is filled with stories of people who rose too fast and fell just as quickly. Fame, money, or influence given prematurely has destroyed many because the inner strength to sustain it was absent. Yet, on the other hand, Gentlemen, history is also filled with stories of men and women who waited, endured the process, and when their time came, that they manifested with such impact that their influence could not be denied. The difference was timing. Therefore, it is wisdom to trust God's timing. Even when it feels slow, His delays are deliberate, His seasons are perfect. And gentlemen, He sees the end from the beginning and knows when the conditions are aligned for the promise to bless and not destroy. Trusting Him means embracing the process even when it is uncomfortable. And gentlemen, and believing that what He withholds now will arrive at the appointed time in a form that will not overwhelm you but elevate you. And gentlemen, when the right gift meets the right time, the result is lasting joy, sustainable success, and blessings that glorify God without bringing hidden sorrow. In the journey of destiny, nothing just happens by chance. Every lifting, every promotion, gentlemen, and every breakthrough in life is preceded by intentional preparation. Gentlemen, God is too wise to usher anyone into the next phase of their life without first equipping them for what lies ahead. Preparation precedes promotion, because without it, blessings can become burdens, opportunities can be wasted, and success can be short-lived. While waiting, God is never idle. He is preparing both the person and the promise, ensuring that when the appointed season arrives, there is a perfect alignment between capacity and opportunity. When people pray for elevation, they often imagine an instant shift, forgetting that God does not only answer prayers by granting requests, but also by preparing hearts. And gentlemen, if a door of greatness opens to someone who has not been prepared, the weight of responsibility can crush them. This is why God takes time to refine character, build resilience, and strengthen faith before ushering His children into seasons of visibility. Gentlemen, what looks like delay is often God ensuring that you will not collapse under the pressure of the very thing you are asking Him for. The story of Joseph is a striking example. He saw visions of leadership as a teenager, dreams that revealed he would one day rule over nations. But before that dream could come to pass, he was taken through years of seeming contradiction. He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. Each of these stages was part of his preparation. In Potiphar's house, Joseph learned administration and stewardship. And gentlemen, in the prison he developed compassion, leadership, and the ability to interpret dreams. By the time Pharaoh summoned him, gentlemen, Joseph was no longer a naive boy with visions. He had become a man capable of managing a nation. Promotion came swiftly when the season arrived, but the years of preparation were what made him fit for the throne. David's life reveals the same pattern. Anointed as king while still a shepherd boy, and gentlemen, he did not ascend the throne immediately. Instead, he returned to the fields, continued tending sheep, and later faced battles while fleeing from Saul. These experiences refined his courage, deepened his worship, and trained him in leadership. By the time the crown finally rested on his head, David was not only a king by anointing, but also by capacity. The years of obscurity and trials had prepared him for the weight of ruling God's people. And gentlemen, without that preparation, his kingship would have been unsustainable. This principle applies in every sphere of life. A student prepares before graduation. An athlete trains before competition. A soldier undergoes drills before battle. In the same way, God prepares His children before entrusting them with greater responsibilities. Sometimes the preparation feels uncomfortable because it demands discipline, sacrifice, and patience. And gentlemen, but those who embrace the process discover that every challenge was shaping them for the future. What feels like hardship today may be the very training ground for tomorrow's assignment. It is also important to understand that God not only prepares the person, but also the promise. The land of Canaan was prepared before Israel entered it. Gentlemen, vineyards they did not plant and houses they did not build were already waiting. But the preparation of the land did not mean instant possession. The people themselves had to be prepared to inherit it. That is why the wilderness journey was necessary. In the wilderness, God taught them dependence on Him, obedience to His voice, and the discipline of following divine order. By the time they stepped into Canaan, gentlemen, they were not just a group of slaves, but a nation ready to steward the land God had promised. Waiting seasons can be frustrating when viewed only from the surface, but with spiritual understanding, one sees that waiting is often preparation in disguise. God is aligning resources, raising helpers, gentlemen, and arranging circumstances so that when the promotion comes, everything fits together perfectly. And gentlemen, sometimes you are ready, but the promise is not yet positioned. And sometimes the promise is ready, but you are still in training. True manifestation requires both to be aligned. One danger many people fall into is despising the season of preparation. Because it does not look glamorous or celebrated, they assume it is wasted time. But obscurity is often God's training ground. In the hidden place, discipline is cultivated, skills are sharpened, and intimacy with God is deepened. When the season of manifestation finally comes, those hidden investments begin to speak loudly. Public promotion is only the fruit of private preparation. Another important truth is that preparation protects promotion. Gentlemen, many people rise too quickly without sufficient preparation and end up collapsing under the pressure of success. But when you have been processed by God, then the weight of promotion no longer overwhelms you. You understand how to navigate honor without pride, challenges without despair, gentlemen, and influence without compromise. Preparation equips you not only to reach the top, but also to remain there. For this reason, those who are waiting must see waiting as an invitation to grow rather than as a punishment. Instead of asking only for speed, it is wise to also ask for strength. Instead of desiring shortcuts, it is wiser to embrace the lessons hidden in the process. Preparation seasons are not meant to break you but to build you. They are divine investments to ensure that when your time comes, you will not just taste promotion but sustain it. Therefore, the next time it seems like answers are delayed, and gentlemen, remember that God may be working on you as much as He is working on your future. Every tear, every challenge, on every test is adding something to you that will be needed when the door opens. Preparation precedes promotion, and when heaven finally announces your season, you will discover that nothing was wasted. The years of obscurity, the trials, the prayers, and the sacrifices were all seeds of preparation planted for the day of manifestation. When person and promise finally meet in alignment, what unfolds is not only promotion, but a testimony that glorifies God and blesses generations. One of the greatest errors in life is to compare your journey with that of another person. Human beings are quick to measure progress by observing others. And gentlemen, and when they see friends or colleagues advancing faster, they are tempted to feel left behind. Yet destiny was never designed to be a competition. Gentlemen, every life carries a unique script written by God, and the timings, seasons, and processes that shape one person may be completely different from another. Gentlemen, to compare yourself with another is to misunderstand the individuality of your own calling and the perfection of God's plan for you. Gentlemen, the truth is that no two destinies are identical. Even twins born of the same parents with similar circumstances will not have the same path in life. And gentlemen, each one has a purpose, a journey, and an appointed season. Just because someone else's breakthrough came earlier does not mean yours will not come. In fact, gentlemen, what looks like a delay in your life may simply be God's intentional design to align you with something greater than what you can currently see. The race of destiny is not about speed, but about alignment with divine timing. The scriptures give us many examples. Consider John the Baptist and Jesus. Gentlemen, John began his ministry earlier, drawing multitudes into the wilderness and preparing the way of the Lord. Jesus, though the Son of God, did not begin his public ministry until the age of 30. By human standards, John seemed ahead. Yet when the season of Jesus came, his 3.5 years of ministry carried an eternal impact that changed the world forever. Each of them was right on time, fulfilling what God had designed. If Jesus had tried to compete with John, he would have stepped out prematurely. And if John had compared himself with Jesus, he would have grown bitter. But both understood that their assignments were unique. Gentlemen, Joseph also teaches this lesson. He was the youngest among his brothers, and for years he looked like the one who would never rise. While his brothers built their lives and secured their places, Joseph was going through pits, slavery, and prison. Anyone looking from the outside would have concluded that his life was a failure. But when his appointed time came, gentlemen, in a single day he was lifted from prison to the palace. Suddenly, the one who seemed behind became the one everyone bowed to. Gentlemen, that is the power of understanding that destiny is not a competition. In modern life, it is easy to fall into the trap of comparison. Let's also, gentlemen, social media has made it worse as people constantly see curated versions of others' successes, marriages, promotions, wealth, and influence. The danger is that one begins to despise their own journey, feeling like God has forgotten them. But what is often unseen are the struggles, failures, and battles behind those images. Moreover, their path is not yours. Gentlemen, what God is building in you may take more time, because the assignment He has given you requires deeper preparation. To compare your behind the scenes with someone else's highlight reel is to rob yourself of peace and gratitude. Destiny is not measured by who arrives first, but by who fulfills the assignment entrusted to them. A mango tree and a bamboo plant both grow, but their processes are different. The bamboo may shoot up quickly, but the mango tree takes time before bearing fruit. When the mango finally produces, its fruits feed many. Both plants are fulfilling purpose, but their timings are not the same. So it is with human lives. Someone may marry at 25 while another marries at 40, yet both can have successful marriages that glorify God. Someone may succeed in business in their 30s while another finds success in their 60s, yet both can impact generations. The key is not speed but fulfillment. The danger of competing in destiny is that it breeds envy, pride, or discouragement. And envy arises when you cannot celebrate another person's success because you feel threatened by it. Gentlemen, pride arises when you feel superior because you seem ahead. Discouragement arises when you feel you will never catch up. And gentlemen, all three are poisons to progress. The healthier perspective is to celebrate others genuinely while trusting that your own season will come. Gentlemen, when you know that God's plan for you is unique, you can rejoice with those who rejoice without feeling diminished. Their testimony becomes a prophecy that if God did it for them, He will also do it for you in your own way and time. Another truth is that when your appointed time comes, nothing can stop it. Doors will open, favor will speak, and gentlemen, and even the resistance of men will only serve as a stepping stone. When Mordecai was delayed in his promotion, it looked as though he was forgotten. Gentlemen, yet when the season came, in one night the king could not sleep until Mordecai was remembered and honored. Timing is powerful, and when God declares it is your time, no force in heaven or on earth can resist it. This should give peace and confidence in seasons where life seems slow. Instead of worrying about who is ahead, the focus should be on staying faithful. And gentlemen, growing and preparing. When destiny is viewed as a personal journey, the pressure of competition fades away. And gentlemen, you realize that the goal is not to run faster than others, but to finish the race marked out for you. Paul said he had finished his course, not someone else's course. That is the true measure of success in destiny. Therefore, two men rest in the assurance that your story is unfolding according to God's perfect script. Celebrate others without envy. And gentlemen, keep working on yourself with diligence and remain aligned with God's will. When the appointed time arrives, years of delay will be redeemed in moments of acceleration. Destiny is not a competition. And gentlemen, and the God who authors your life will ensure that nothing is missing and nothing is late. When your time comes, it will be undeniable, gentlemen, and no one will be able to stop it. Anxiety is one of the greatest enemies of faith and progress because it clouds the heart, weakens conviction, and makes it difficult to discern the voice of God. Many times, people miss opportunities, make hasty decisions, or sabotage their own blessings simply because they allowed anxiety to dictate their actions. Anxiety has a way of magnifying problems, making them appear larger than they are, and at the same time diminishing our awareness of God's presence and ability. When anxiety takes root, gentlemen, it shifts the focus from what God can do to what might go wrong. And in that state, it becomes almost impossible to walk in peace and confidence. Trust, on the other hand, sustains. Trust is not passive ignorance. It is a deliberate choice to rest in God's faithfulness, even when the outcome is not visible. It is a spiritual discipline to say, I do not see how this will work out, but I know the one who is leading me. Trust acknowledges that God is too faithful to fail, then too wise to make mistakes, and too loving to abandon His children. This posture does not necessarily change circumstances instantly, but it changes the heart of the one going through them. It keeps hope alive, it silences fear, and it allows the believer to continue in obedience until results manifest. The truth is that everyone encounters situations that test patience and faith. And gentlemen, whether it is waiting for provision, healing, direction, or a breakthrough, the human heart is naturally prone to worry. Jesus himself warned against anxiety, teaching that no one can add a single cubit to their stature by worrying. Man, anxiety drains energy without solving problems, while trust attracts divine intervention. Gentlemen, the peace that comes with trusting God is itself a sign of faith, and scripture says that faith is what pleases him. Consider the example of the Israelites in the wilderness. God had delivered them with mighty signs and wonders. Gentlemen, yet at the slightest challenge they became anxious and complained. They worried about food, water, and enemies. And gentlemen, even though they had seen God part the Red Sea, their anxiety blinded them from remembering God's past faithfulness, and it delayed their journey. And gentlemen, what could have been a short transition into the promised land turned into 40 years of wandering because they failed to rest in God's faithfulness. Anxiety delayed them, but those who chose trust, like Joshua and Caleb, were sustained and entered into the promise. Anxiety delays because it produces wrong decisions. A person under pressure rarely makes choices based on wisdom or divine instruction. Instead, gentlemen, they are driven by fear of the unknown. Many have entered relationships, careers, or financial commitments out of anxiety. And gentlemen, only to later realize that waiting a little longer in trust would have produced a better outcome. Anxiety makes people settle for less than God's best because they cannot bear the uncertainty of waiting. But trust teaches patience, and patience ensures that when the blessing comes, it is both lasting and fulfilling. Another way anxiety delays is by exhausting the soul. Worry drains mental, emotional, and even physical strength, the energy meant for creativity, productivity. And prayer is consumed by endless what-if thoughts. The person becomes paralyzed by fear of failure, and progress slows down. Trust, however, sustains by preserving inner strength. A trusting heart can pray with boldness, plan with clarity, gentlemen, and act with courage because it is anchored in the assurance that God is with them. This is why those who trust are like Mount Zion, unshaken regardless of external circumstances. Trust also sustains relationships. Anxiety makes people restless, irritable, and impatient with others. Gentlemen, it breaks bonds because the anxious person often transfers their frustration onto those around them. But when someone rests in God's faithfulness, they can remain kind, patient, and loving even in seasons of uncertainty. This stability preserves families, friendships, and partnerships, and creates an environment where God's blessings can manifest. David provides a perfect picture of how trust sustains. When pursued by Saul, gentlemen, he had every reason to be anxious. His life was threatened daily, and he was living in caves instead of the palace he had been anointed for. Gentlemen, yet David continually declared his trust in God through psalms of worship. He said, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." This trust kept his heart from despair and sustained him until the day God fulfilled his promise. Gentlemen, his anxiety would not have hastened the throne, but his trust carried him through until the throne became his. Gentlemen, trust is built by remembering God's past faithfulness. Every believer has testimonies of times when God showed up, sometimes at the very last moment. Recalling those moments strengthens faith for present challenges. Anxiety forgets what God has done, but trust rehearses his goodness. Gentlemen, the more you meditate on his past interventions, the easier it becomes to rest in his ability to do it again. Trust is also strengthened by immersing in the Word, because the Word reveals God's nature, and knowing him makes it easier to trust him. Ultimately, anxiety is a sign of misplaced focus. When eyes are fixed on circumstances, fear grows. But when eyes are fixed on God, trust grows. Trust does not deny reality. It simply acknowledges a higher reality, that God is in control. This perspective produces peace that passes understanding. A peace that guards both heart and mind. And in that atmosphere of peace, and gentlemen, answers often come more quickly because the believer can hear God's instructions clearly and follow them without the noise of worry. Seasons of waiting and uncertainty are tests that reveal whether one's faith is in circumstances or in God's character. And gentlemen, anxiety delays because it entangles the heart in fear, while trust sustains because it anchors the heart in God's unchanging nature. The promise may not always come immediately, but those who trust will never be put to shame. In the end, trust will carry you where anxiety never could, because it aligns you with the one who controls times and seasons. When God steps into a situation, time ceases to be a limitation and impossibilities bow to his authority. Gentlemen, one of the mysteries of divine timing is that what seems like wasted years in the eyes of men can be redeemed in a single moment when God chooses to act. And human beings are often bound by the process of gradual progress, where results come step by step, little by little, and according to natural effort. Gentlemen, but when God's timing aligns, it is as though he suspends the normal order of life and accelerates a person into realms they never imagined. The story of Joseph is a clear example. For many years he was in prison, forgotten and abandoned. But in one day, he was lifted from the dungeon and positioned as Prime Minister of Egypt. No human connection or effort could have produced that speed. It was a testimony that when God's appointed time arrives, nothing can stop the sudden manifestation of destiny. Years of waiting are not wasted, even though they may feel painful and stretching. During those seasons, God is preparing vessels, testing character, building patience, and aligning circumstances. But when the fullness of time comes, he does not need to negotiate with men to bring it to pass. His hand can compress what others would take decades to achieve into a single divine encounter. This is why it is dangerous to compare your journey with others. Some may rise early while others may rise later. Gentlemen, but when God's timing arrives for you, the results will carry such speed that even those who went ahead will marvel at your acceleration. Divine speed is not a product of shortcuts. It is the outcome of alignment with God's season. A person may try to force doors open and gentlemen manipulate opportunities or strive tirelessly, but all that produces is weariness and disappointment. Yet when God himself declares that the season has come, the very doors that once resisted will open effortlessly. The reason it happens so swiftly is that everything required for the fulfillment has already been set in place, though unseen. Gentlemen, when he says the time has come, connections align, resources appear, helpers are positioned, and paths are cleared. The story of the Israelites leaving Egypt shows how swiftly God can move when his time arrives. For 400 years they suffered under oppression, praying and crying for deliverance. Generations lived and died without seeing freedom. But when the fullness of time came, God raised a deliverer in Moses, broke Pharaoh's resistance through mighty signs, and in one night the entire nation walked out of captivity. What generations longed for happened suddenly because the appointed season had come. It teaches that no matter how long a delay seems, and gentlemen, when God intervenes, the redemption of time will be so remarkable that you will forget the pain of the waiting season. Gentlemen, one of the reasons God's timing brings such speed is because he is not limited by the natural laws that govern men. We may calculate by age, by opportunities, or by our background, but he is able to rewrite stories beyond the limitations of those factors. Abraham and Sarah had passed the natural age of childbearing. Yet when God declared that the appointed time for Isaac had come, gentlemen, nature could not resist his word. What seemed impossible was fulfilled effortlessly because divine timing overrides natural impossibility. Gentlemen, this truth should instill hope in those who feel that life has passed them by. You may look at your age, your achievements, or your missed opportunities and feel that it is too late. But when God decides to favor you, gentlemen, he can lift you so swiftly that those who once mocked you will not be able to understand your sudden change of level. Divine timing ensures that your testimony is undeniable and your rising undeniable. Ladies and gentlemen, because the speed will bear the signature of God's hand and not human effort. Another dimension of divine speed is restoration. There are seasons when you feel like you have lost time, opportunities, or years to mistakes, delays, or attacks. But when God restores, gentlemen, he does not merely bring you back to where you should have been. He multiplies results so that it is as though nothing was lost. When Joel spoke of God restoring the years that the locust had eaten, not just the crops. Gentlemen, it means that God can so accelerate your life that in 1 year you can cover ground that would normally take 10. Gentlemen, this is why it is important not to despair in seasons of waiting. What seems like delay is often setting you up for a divine acceleration that will redeem lost years. When God's timing aligns, testimonies will not require lengthy explanations. The results themselves will speak. Even skeptics will acknowledge that only God could have made such things happen. The sudden change of status, the unexpected opportunities, the unusual favor, all of these are tokens of divine timing at work. It is not that the waiting was useless, gentlemen, but that the waiting was building momentum for a supernatural launch. Just as an arrow is pulled back before it is released forward with speed, gentlemen, so God sometimes allows a person to be drawn into obscurity or delay so that when the moment of release comes, their rising will be unstoppable. Gentlemen, this is why believers are encouraged to trust God's process and not grow weary. Delay does not mean denial. It often means preparation for divine speed. It is far better to wait for God's appointed time and rise by His hand than to struggle endlessly by human effort. For when His timing comes, even enemies will be unable to resist your advancement. What once looked like a closed door will swing open of its own accord, and what seemed unattainable will be handed over to without stress. In the end, the mystery of divine timing is that God never arrives late. To men it may feel delayed, but to Him it is precise. And when that precision manifests, speed is inevitable. Years of struggle, obscurity, or delay can be overturned in a single day, gentlemen. And what once seemed impossible will happen so effortlessly that you will know it was never by your power, but by His grace and timing.